So in today's video, I'm going to show you a game-changing trick for targeting long-tail keywords for your directory. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking two different collection categories. So in one case, locations, and in the other case, a specific event category or listing category, and we're going to combine them into one super category, which looks a little like this. Now, the reason why you want to do this is because this here will start targeting high intent long tail keywords that one, convert better, are less competitive, and ultimately will just increase how much traffic you can drive to your site through Google. This is going to be a game changer. Let's get into it. Friends, what's going on? Okay, today we've got a juicy tutorial. I'm going to show you a directory CMS hack that will allow you to create what I've called super collections. Now, super collections is just a name that I made up, but basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be combining two different collections into one so that we can target long tail keywords. Now, what do I mean by this? When you set up your directory, the first page that you're probably going to create is your all listing page. So you add all of your products, all of your vendors, and they'll all basically sit on one page. Now, the thing with that page is because you've only got that one page, the keywords that you're typically targeting are things that are related to your listing type in general. So in my case, it's something like running races in Canada. Now, that in itself is quite broad and oftentimes is quite competitive. It's hard to drive traffic, and the traffic that you do drive is not really super high intent. And so for that reason, what a good next step is to create category listing pages. And so your category listing pages will very much depend on how it is that people search for your things. Now, when I went out and did my keyword research, I found that there are two main ways that people search for my types of listings. Number one is by location, and then the other way is by a specific type of event. So because I'm doing running races, people often type in things like Marathon Vancouver, Marathon Ottawa. And because of that, I decided that a really good next step would be to create a dedicated listing page for all of the events or running races happening in a specific location, and then also to create a listing page with all of the events happening in the country for a specific category. And this is ultimately what I ended up with. So now I've got a page that shows all of my upcoming running races in Ontario, and I've got a page for Toronto. And now the keywords that I'm targeting are a lot more specific, which means I have less competition that I need to deal with. Plus, Google is more likely to rank me higher because it speaks more to the search intent of someone who is looking for a specific running race in, for example, Toronto. Same thing applies to when someone is looking for a specific race type. So if, for example, someone is looking for a 5K running race, now what we'll be able to do is actually narrow it down because we've created a dedicated landing page for it. So in this case, we've got 5K running races in Canada. But if you think about it from a user experience, someone who is looking for 5K running races is probably not looking for it in the entire country. So what we typically do is we add things like filters. So that way someone can kind of see, hey, how many events in this category are in different places, and then they can kind of apply their filters, and then they'll be able to find what they're after a lot faster. But the problem with using filters like this is that oftentimes Google can't see your filters. And so therefore it won't index your page for that specific combination of location and race type. So right now, all that Google is really indexing me for is 5K races in Canada. And whilst you will still get a little bit of traction with it, what we ideally want to do is rank for 5K races in Ottawa, 5K races in Toronto, those long tail searches. Because once again, if we go and have a look at our keyword research, you'll see that a majority of the searches that people make are not one or the other. It's a combination of the two. And that is really where the search volume will come from. And so what we ideally want to do is set up a workflow that will allow us to combine these two together so that we end up with a bunch of pages like this here, where we have 5K races in Toronto. Then we have a dedicated page for 10K races in Toronto. And on those pages, what we want to do is we want to filter all of our listings by that particular combination. That way, when someone goes into Google later on and types in something like 5K races in Toronto or Ottawa, that we list way, way higher because we have created a dedicated page to that. Now, this setup is super simple in Webflow, but somewhat complex inside of Airtable and Whalesync, because you'll need to set up a workflow to create all of the different combinations for each other. So that's what I'm going to be walking you through today. But before we dive into the meat of it, one big shout out to our sponsor, Whalesync. Now, at this point, I hope you all know what Whalesync is. As you know, I use Airtable as my admin portal for the running directory and also for all of my other projects, by the way. And I need to make sure that all of the information that sits inside of my Airtable matches up what sits inside of the Webflow CMS so that it creates all these different pages for me. And in order for me to keep everything in sync, I use Whalesync. So what I love about Whalesync is it's super simple to set up. You basically say, hey, Webflow collection, here's my Airtable database. These are the records that belong to each other. Keep it all in sync. And it will just go ahead and do that for you. Now, recently, Whalesync launched 2 brand new features that are going to make this process even easier. And I'm actually going to show you exactly how they work in this video today. But I just wanted to wrap it up by saying thanks again to Whalesync for sponsoring with this video. With all that out of the way, let's dive into the first part of all of this, which is to get it all set up inside of Webflow. Okay, so the first step is going to be to set up our new collection inside of Webflow. Now, this process in Webflow is actually pretty straightforward. There's nothing special about it. There's only one minor change that you make from regular collections. So what we're going to do is, if we're going to have a look at my race locations page, we're going to need to create a dedicated page title field. We're going to need to have our own page description. Because we're going to also be creating custom SEO titles and meta description, we're going to have to create fields for those as well. And then finally, where the magic kind of happens is when we add our collection list like this, what we will need to do is actually add 2 filters. So instead of just filtering by the actual race category, what we'll need to do is add a filter for the race category and the race location, and that will allow us to create a combination of the 2. Now, the way that this setup works is super straightforward. I've already started by adding a new collection, and in this collection, I already started to add all of the different fields that I need. Now, quick word on how this setup works. Just give your collection a name, make it descriptive, give it a nice URL-friendly path name, and then you can just go ahead and create all of the fields that you're going to need. So, as I mentioned, the page title, the page description, the SEO title, and the meta description are kind of like the basic fields. But then, because we're going to be filtering by 2 different collection types, I also added a field for the category reference and the location reference. And these are both single reference fields that link to my race categories table, and this one here links to my race locations table. Now, as soon as you create a page like this, what Webflow will do is it will create a new template page for us. So if we jump into here, you'll see that a new CMS collection page was created. And if you go to that page, it's currently empty. Now, what you typically do now is go and build out this page. But because the race category page is the same, the race location page is the same, and even the find a race page or the all listing page is the same, what I actually like to do is create reusable templates. And so what I've done is I've created a component called the listing page template. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop that in here. And just like that, you can see how it's just added the entire page straight in here as a component. I'm going to unhook the component, and now I'm able to start mapping up the different fields to each other. So let's quickly go over what we're going to need to map up. So the first thing is we're going to have to map up the actual location name. So that is a single text field. And what we're going to be referencing here is inside of our CMS collection, the location reference, and then in here, the name. Now, all of this is empty right now, so that's why you can see it all disappearing. But really, if we go and later on map it, you'll see how it automatically populates everything. This here is the page title field. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and map my page title. And then this one here is going to be my page description, and so on. And then finally, my collection list, the way that I apply my filters is by simply saying, hey, only show a listing when the race, the event category reference is the same as the one on this page. Now, because I haven't added anything yet, it's not going to show anything. But I then also need to just do the same for the locations. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add my location reference, and it has to be equal to this page as well. And so that way, it now will filter by both the location and the event category. Now, let's go and see what this looks like in practice. I'm going to add a new one, and I'm just going to call this Toronto 10K. And you'll see how it creates a new page for me. And now in here, what I can do is I can simply go ahead and I can start writing out the name, well, the page title. So I'm going to say, find a 10K running races in Toronto. Just for time's sake, I'm also going to use this as my SEO title. And then for the actual page description, I've got a template that I use as well. So I'm just going to drop that in here. And basically it will be something along the lines of like basically a combination of all the variables that I've put in here. So in this case, it's going to be find your next 10K race in, and then I'm going to put in here Toronto. But again, I'm not going to be creating this in here. This is just to demonstrate kind of how you would populate it. And then once all of that is done, I believe we will be good to go. So I'm just going to copy this. And then of course, the last thing to do is to add our appropriate category reference and our location reference. So it actually needs to be the 10K. And now, as soon as I have that, I can now go ahead and stage it for publishing and preview the page. Now, because I've created all these pages, it's automatically going to start populating it with all the values. You can see how now my list is filtering the right events out as well. And that is pretty much it. Now, if you want to have a nice background image, you can either upload a custom image to your CMS, but what I do just to save time is I actually just use the image that is in the location reference field. I've got a field for the background image. And so that way the actual background image will change from location to location. Now, this can definitely be improved on, but you can kind of get the idea of how you would create a page like this, how you have your own unique titles, and how the CMS filtering works. So now the question is, okay, we've got this page set up. How do we now create all these combinations? Because as you can imagine, right now I've got 32 categories and 71 locations. So that is a total of about 2,200 combinations. And at the moment, if I wanted to create those 2,200 combinations, I would actually have to jump in here and manually create every single one. We obviously don't want to do that. And so now I'm going to show you how we can actually power all of the page creation from inside of our admin portal in Airtable. But in order for us to do this inside of Airtable, we're first going to have to set up our Airtable to Webflow sync. And that's what we're going to do now in Whalesync. Okay, now, if you are brand new to watching my videos, Airtable is what I use as my admin portal. I can basically control the flow of data from inside of Airtable, and if I want to make changes to something inside of Webflow, I don't need to log in there every single time. Another advantage of using Airtable is that you can take advantage of some of their inbuilt features that I'm going to show you in a second that will allow you to set up automations. It will allow you to basically manage data in bulk, basically all the things that you pretty much can't do inside of the Webflow CMS. Now, in order for us to make sure that all the information inside of my admin portal is the exact same as inside of the Webflow CMS, we're going to need to make sure that both the tools sync with each other. And the tool that I use in order to make this sync possible is Whalesync. Now, I've made tons of videos on Whalesync, so go back, check it out. Basically, the way it works is that you provide your Airtable base and your Webflow CMS. You basically tell Whalesync which tables belong together and which fields belong together, and then Whalesync will just make sure that everything stays in sync at any given time. It is hands down one of the best automation tools that I've used for this particular use case because it's a set it up once and forget it type of thing. Now, recently, Whalesync has actually launched a new feature that has made setting up your initial syncs so much easier. Back in the day, what you would have to do is you would have to jump into Airtable, and if you created a new CMS collection like I did here, what you would have to do is go into Airtable, create this table, and then you would have to go and create all of the individual fields, and then you'd go into Whalesync and map all the fields up. That would add an extra 20-30 minutes. There's a lot of room for error. However, now Whalesync has actually added a feature that makes this process so much easier. The way it works is you just click on add a table mapping, and this works if you're just getting started as well. And then what you can do is you can select your CMS collection that you created. So in my case, it's races by locations plus categories. Now, typically what you'd have to do is map it up with whatever field table you created. But as I said, now they've got a new feature that actually allows you to click on new table. And what this will do is basically Whalesync will create the table for you. So if we jump back into Airtable, you will see how it automatically created my table for me. Now, as you can see, this table right now does not have any fields. And the reason why it doesn't have any fields yet is because that is what we need to specify in the next step. So again, in the past, what you'd have to do is manually create all of the fields inside of Airtable and then map them up one by one. But now you have a feature where you can just click on create fields, copy fields from Webflow, and then you can just select all of the fields that you want to create inside of Airtable. And so I typically create all of them except for the last updated, last published, and created date. Even though let's just leave them in for now. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on copy fields, and what Whalesync will do is it will now just go ahead and automatically set up your structure for you. And so you'll be able to see in real time how it starts to add all of the fields that I have inside of the Webflow CMS and that are essentially powering all of my different pages directly inside of Airtable. That means that as soon as this is set up and the syncing starts, all I need to do is just control data from inside of here and I'll be good to go. Now, as soon as you activate your sync, you just click on the activate button. What's going to happen is Whalesync's going to sync what's inside of Airtable and it's going to sync what's inside of Webflow, and it will then go ahead and create a matching record inside of your Airtable base or inside of Webflow. So because we set this up inside of Webflow first, what it has done is it's found that there's a Toronto 10K record in here, and so it automatically went ahead and added this to my table inside of Airtable. Now, from here, what I can do is I can pretty much freely modify the text on the pages, and that will then automatically update inside of Webflow. So if I change this to upcoming 10K races in Toronto, then what will happen is it typically takes like a few seconds, but Whalesync will recognize that a change was made and it will then automatically sync those changes into the Webflow CMS. So if we go in here and I refresh this page, and unfortunately as of right now you will need to refresh the CMS in order for you to see those changes. But you just jump in here, hit the refresh button, and you'll see how your page title will have changed. Again, it can take a few seconds, so maybe it's not fully updated yet. But the short of it is that now everything will be syncing back and forth, and you can essentially control all of the information inside of your Webflow CMS from inside of Airtable. Now, that brings me to the second feature. So typically what you could do now is just start adding records. So if, for example, we wanted to create one for Toronto Marathon, what we could do is we could just go in here, add all of our information. So I'm just going to add that in here. I'll add my location. And then as we had done before, we could just go through and just add our page titles, page descriptions, and so on. And what will happen is it will now automatically sync all of these changes back into Whalesync. Now, you'll see that those changes synced as soon as you see how the Webflow record ID was created and the slug was created. And you'll also see what the status of the actual record is, so you can kind of control that in there as well. Now, a quick little tip that I have for everyone who is wanting to have more control over, what records get synced into Webflow and which ones don't, because as of right now, every single time I add a new record, it just automatically syncs it in, and we might want to wait before we create the syncing. So one thing that you can do is you can add, first of all, a status field. And the way I typically approach it is I just go new, which is basically the default state. Then you've got draft, which means that it gets added to the Webflow CMS, but it's in draft mode, so it's not on the actual public page. Active, which is it's live on the site, and then finally archived, which just basically means that the record is inside of the CMS, but it's in an archived state. Now, one of the new features that Whalesync launched that will allow you to have even more control over what gets displayed and what doesn't get displayed is a feature called sync by view. And so basically the way that this works is you can come in here and you can say, all right, we're going to create a Whalesync view. And this view here is going to determine what is and what isn't inside of our Webflow CMS. And so what we can do is we can add to this view just certain filters. So in this case, I'm going to say, hey, only include records where the status is active. That way, if you, for example, add a new record and you just still need a little bit of time to populate all the content, then what you can do is you can just leave it in the new version or in the new state, and it will then not sync into the Webflow CMS until you've changed it over to active. Now, before we make this work, we're actually going to have to make one more change inside of Whalesync, and that is to now include that filter. So what we're going to have to do here is, whoopsie daisy, is we're going to go ahead and pause our sync because we're going to be making a change to it. We're then going to go to our table mappings, and we're then going to go to the mapping of that specific table. Now, unfortunately, as of right now, you cannot make an edit to an existing mapping. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to actually have to delete this table mapping just like this. And then as soon as it's deleted, we're going to have to re-add it with a minor change. So typically this doesn't take too long. There we go, it's gone. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add our table mapping. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to grab my collection, and it will automatically recognize the table. However, one change that you're going to have to make is now, instead of mapping the entire table, what we want to do is we only want to map the view of that table. So let's go ahead, find our table, there it is, and then you'll see that all of your views are available as well. And the view that I want to use is the Whalesync view. That way, it will only send data over to Webflow when it's in the Whalesync view. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to click the create table mapping, and because all of the names inside of Airtable and the Webflow CMS are the same, it will automatically recognize that all of the fields belong together, and it will automatically map it for you, so you can immediately click on save and continue and move on to the next step. Now, the next step here is pretty crucial, because what we want to do in this next step is we want to make sure that if we're mapping existing tables and collections to each other, that we're not accidentally creating duplicates of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to scan our records, and what Whalesync is going to do is it's going to look at Airtable, and it's going to look at Webflow, and it's going to see, okay, how many records are in each table? And so right now it recognizes that inside of Webflow there are 2 records. And so if we go and have a look, you'll see that inside of the CMS, it's got these 2 records, the marathon and the 10K. And inside of my view, inside of Airtable, it only has the 1 record. So if I want to map these up, what I'm going to do is I'm quickly going to switch this to active. And then inside here, I'm just going to rescan the records. And now because that record is in that view, it should now recognize that there are 2 records there. So next, what we want to do is we want to basically tell Whalesync if records in Airtable and Webflow belong together. Because if we don't, what it's going to do is it's going to recognize these two records and it's just going to create two more records that correspond with those records inside of Webflow and vice versa. But because they already exist, we actually just want to specify that we want to match the records where the Webflow record ID matches up with each other. And that way it will recognize, oh wait, these records that are in Webflow right now and inside of Airtable, they actually belong together. So instead of creating new ones, we're actually just going to keep these existing ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to confirm it. And just like that, it's going to go into preparing the sync and it's going to now start syncing all of the records with each other. So just like that, we've now got the entire setup going where we can now control what goes on inside of Webflow directly from Airtable. So big shout out to Whalesync for these new updates. They are really awesome. Now we're going to move on to the meat of it. And this is where the magic really happens. We now want to set up a workflow that goes and looks at our race categories table, and it looks at the race locations table. And for every single location and race type, we want to create a combination. Because, for example, if we want to have Toronto 10K, Toronto Marathon, we basically need to go through each location, and for each location that exists, we want to go ahead and create a new record. Now, again, I want to remind you that if you are going to create a combination of both of these records, you're basically going to take the amount of records that you have in one of your collection times the amount of records that you have in your other collection. So in some cases, that can be thousands and thousands of records. So you want to make sure that the records that the number of records that you're creating won't blow out your Webflow CMS limit. But also one thing that you want to avoid is to basically add pages that don't have any events. And so, for example, in certain situations, I have, events that don't have that many races. So for example, beach runs, I only have 4. So because I only have 4 events, I don't need to create a combination of beach runs for every single location, because then you just end up with a bunch of empty pages. And that again is something that you just want to avoid. So what we want to do is we kind of want to think about, okay, what are the actual records that we want to create these combinations for? And the way that I take control of it is by basically adding a field in here called include in super combo. And then I just manually decide whether or not I want to have that particular combination or that particular event category included. So in this case, I want to have the 5K one, the 10K one, the half marathon one, the marathon, the 50K, the 50, and so on. And so that is what I'm later on going to use as a criteria for whether or not I want to create a super collection around that. And the same logic also applies to locations. So there are going to be certain locations that I have in there that have one event. So again, I don't need to create all of these combinations if it actually doesn't end up having any events. So once again, what I did is I just added a field that basically allows me to decide whether or not I want to include it. So it's just a checkbox. And then I go ahead and tick all of them if I want them included. And so in this particular case, I've only picked the big cities. Next, let's talk about the logic as to how we're going to create all of these combinations. Now, if we think of it in a from a logical perspective, what we're doing is we're going through every single record in the table that has the super collections combo field ticked. And for each one of these records, we want to create a combo record for each record that sits inside of the locations table that also has that field tick. So in this case, I've just selected 11 of them. But really the end result of this should be is that it starts off with the 5K and then it goes through and it goes Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, all that kind of stuff, and then creates those combinations in here. and it just automatically stores them all the way through. It populates our category ref field, it populates our location ref field, and then we'll deal with the page titles and so on later on, but we might also want it to generate a slug for us. Now, the way that we can do this very fast and easily inside of Airtable is using Airtable scripts. Now, what is Airtable scripts? So Airtable scripts is basically an app that you can use inside of Airtable to write custom JavaScript to basically automate certain parts of your Airtable workflows. And it's an absolute game changer. Like, I love using this, but obviously there'll be some of you who are looking at this and go like, well, I don't know how to code, so this is going to be useless to me. I don't really know how to code either, but I just use ChatGPT in order to create these scripts. And I'm going to walk you exactly through how to create those scripts. And then you'll see that it's actually somewhat straightforward. So really what you want to do is you just want to think about the logic of what you would want the automation tool to do. So for example, the first thing is we would want to loop through all records in our, and then what we're going to call it's the race by category page. And one thing that's going to be important here is because we're going to be feeding this to ChatGPT, if you want it to write the right script, we actually need to be specific about the actual names of the tables and the fields that we're using, because it's actually just going to use that in order to write it. So we're going to loop through all the records, and then we're going to say only continue with records where, and now what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, we're going through this table here, and we only want to include records where this field, the include in super combo field, is true. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back in here where, and then I'm going to put this in quotes because it's a field, is true. And then we're going to say for each of these records, create a combination, we'll call it combo record with, and then what we're going to say, each record in the, and then let's have a look at the table. The table is the race locations table. So we're going to say in the race locations table, where the, and then we're going to go add this, is true. So we're basically saying go through all the records in the race category table, only continue with the ones where include in super combo is true, and for each of these records create a combo record with records in the race locations table where the include super combo is also true. For each combination, create a new record in, and then what is the name of this table? I'm just going to go over here and I'm just going to copy it. And this is so case sensitive that I do actually recommend copy and pasting this. And so we're going to say, and create the name, which is a combination of the name in the race by category table and the name in the race locations table. And then finally, we also want to go store the record ID. What are we going to say? Store the record ID for the record in race by category in. And so what we want to do is we want to store it in this field here, which is called category ref. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to call this in category ref, and the race and the record ID for the race location in location ref. And so basically this is how I would think about the logic. So let's just go through it one by one. So we loop through all the records in the race categories table. Then we only continue with the ones where super combo is true. And then for each of those records, we want to create a combo record with records in the race locations table where it's also checked as true. So, and so on. You kind of get the idea. Now what I would do is I'd head into ChatGPT and start writing the script. Okay, so all I'll do here is I'll just get all the comments that I added and I'll just throw it in here, and then I'll just go in and I'll just ask it to start writing. And so what it will do is it will start explaining how it works and basically go over, you know, the logic behind it all, and then it will go through the process of writing the script, or sometimes it does, right? The Airtable script. Probably should have just said that as well. Okay, so it now goes ahead, determines all the tables, and it goes ahead and writes it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, copy this. We're going to go back into our Airtable base, and we're now going to replace all these comments with this. And so now what I'm expecting would happen is it would now, when we run it, start creating all these combo records. So I'm going to click on run, and then we're going to wait and see what happens. Now, here we go. You can already see how it's starting to create all these combinations with each other, works perfectly, adds them into a new state. And once it's gone through the first type of category, it immediately goes into the next one. And so now, because all of the statuses are still in new, we don't need to worry about it automatically syncing into our Webflow CMS, but we basically have all the combinations that we'll be able to use to now start populating the page titles, page descriptions, SEO titles, and so on. And as soon as that is done, we'll be good to go. Now, there are a few little combinations that we might want to add to this. So the first thing that I'd want to do is to potentially also store all of the events. So at the moment, it's only creating the combinations, but it's not actually telling me what events are part of this. So you can really build on this first version, and it's really going to come down to what your specific use case is. But in my case, what I want to do is I also want to populate my events field with events that match this collection. So for example, I want to find all of the 10K running races in Toronto, and I want to store them in here, because then what I'll be able to do is look up how many events belong to each combination, and that will then help me decide whether or not I want to go ahead and, publish this as a unique standalone landing page. Now, one of the other things that we'll need to factor in is sometimes we'll be adding more events over time. So what we'll want to do is set up a way for us to basically rerun this. And so what it will need to do first is check whether or not a specific combination already exists. And if it does exist, it basically updates it, and if it doesn't exist, it creates a new one. Because as you can see here, it created another 10K Toronto combination, even though it already exists. So what I'd recommend doing is actually just jumping in here and basically explaining how you want your script to actually run, what you want it to do, and that will then ultimately give you a more complete version that takes care of all of the use cases that you're covering. So to save us time, I'm just going to go ahead and do mine, and then I'm going to explain how it works. Okay, so I've now updated it. I've pulled in all of my tables. Now, another thing that I've added is the ability to generate slugs. I've also added a way for me to check whether or not an existing event already exists. And I also set up a step where it also checks my listings table to see if a particular event matches the filters that were created. And if it does, it will then store it inside of that field and so on. So once that is done, what I actually recommend doing is just simply deleting all of the records that you created when you ran it the first time, and then just go ahead, start from scratch. So you'll typically see that you're going to run into little issues. If you do, no worries. Oftentimes the issue that will come up is that certain field names simply don't exist. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to go ahead and just change that up. So in this case, that field name wasn't correct. So we're going to go, the table name wasn't correct. So what's the table called? Races by locations and categories. And then we can just go ahead, try again and see what happens. A lot of these issues are solved very easily in ChatGPT. And now you can see how in the background, it automatically starts creating all of these for me. You can see that it's populating the events and we're pretty much good to go. Now, all of these issues are very easily fixed in ChatGPT. So just drop your error message in there and it will basically tell you what is going on, what's wrong and how you can fix it. Now, one field while this is running that I want to add is a count field. So I want to be able to count how many events are part of each combination. So I'm just going to go ahead, add that, and I'm just going to go and call this count from events. And mref just stands for multi-reference, just as an FYI. And you can now see, hey, here are how many events are part of each of the filters. And you kind of see it's quite cool. It's got all these combinations. There'll be some that don't actually have any combinations. And that is cool too, because what I can do now with this field is say, hey, I only want it to be synced if the status is active, but also if the count is larger than 5, because I don't want to create these pages if there are no events, essentially. And so now, even if I do switch this one here to active, it won't go live because technically speaking, it has 0 events, so it doesn't fit the criteria. But for these above ones, we have now created some very useful subpages. Now, one more thing that is left to do is to populate the page title, the page description, SEO title, and meta description. And then we are pretty much ready to start launching our pages. Now, there are a few different ways that we could do this. I mean, you could connect this to an Airtable automation or an Airtable script that automatically generates the page title or page description for you. I do that a lot. I use it to generate content just in general. But, you know, another real quick one that we could do is just use an Airtable formula in order to create our pages. And so the way that that would work is you'd just come in here, you would click on Edit Field, you'll switch that to formula, and then you can basically dynamically generate these formulas by combining different values in here. So you can see here, it says 5K races in Toronto, 5K races in Calgary, and so on. And so all we're going to need to do is just do that for every single page that we have in, or every single field that we have in here. So once again, I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to say formula. I'm going to paste that in. I'm going to hit the save button, and just like that, it's created that for me as well. So I'm going to do the SEO title and the meta description, and then we'll return and we'll turn it all on. Okay, so next, all I need to do is just switch them all to active, and I'm just going to pull it down. And now I'm going to pull it all the way down because obviously there are quite a few events that shouldn't have pages created if they are below 5 events. So if we go into the Whalesync view, you'll see that it only has 28 records. So it doesn't have all of them. It only has, you know, it doesn't have all 66. It only has the 28 that fit that particular criteria. And so now theoretically, with all of that in mind, you could actually just go through the process of adding even more to your super collection. So now that I know that the testing, that the setup of it all works, you can actually just go through here and enable it for whatever other events you want. So if I go to my race category and I go to my grid view, I can actually just go ahead and I can just start clicking on all of them. And then all that is left for me to do is to just jump into my extension and to then just go ahead and rerun the script. And one of the additional things that I added to the script is that it now checks whether or not a particular combination already exists. And if it does, it will just go ahead and skip it. That way you don't need to worry about accidentally duplicating things. Plus, if it already exists, it will update any new events that were added, which is quite handy. But you can now see it's going to go through there. It's going to create new combinations if needed. For example, all these like kids sub events. And just like that, you've basically built a system that will automatically create all of these combo pages for you. Now, if you want, you can also set the default Webflow status to be active, and that will automatically turn them all on and then only use your filtering criteria to determine whether or not something should be in there. But ultimately, you can do this type of combining for as many different things as you want. So different genres, different locations. You know, if it's time-based, you can do by month, all that type of stuff. And this is a phenomenal way to target long tail keywords. Okay, and so then once again, you know, Whalesync will kick in. There'll always be a little bit of time that it will take to populate all the different events, but if you hit the refresh button, you'll see it all coming through. You'll see how it automatically populates everything that you added inside of your CMS. And then once all of that is done and you click on the preview button, you'll be able to see all the good work that you have done. So let's just wait for a second. There you go. You can kind of see how it automatically has populated the title. You can see how it's kind of created all this stuff. You can see that the search and filtering has been created. The SEO title and the meta description has been populated, and you're now pretty much good to go. So ultimately, this here is a phenomenal way to really, you know, speed up the process for creating long tail keyword sub landing pages. And so obviously from here, there'll probably be a few more little bits and pieces that you need to clean up. For example, some stuff with your CMS filtering. But as a starting point, this will allow you to create so many more different pages. And again, it will make it so much easier for you to rank for some of these long tail keywords. I hope you found this useful. If you did, please leave a comment and a like down below. Other than that, I'll see you back here for the next one. Bye.